Welcome to the White Knuckling It podcast with Justin Burke.
No, we got out of the lake with the pre-roll.
And Mitchell O'Brien.
It's in his butt.
They share their experiences from white knuckling sobriety to becoming successful and living life in recovery.
Yeah, boy.
Welcome to the White Knuckling It podcast with Justin Burke and
Mitchell O'Brien.
what's up, man?
Yeah, boy.
Man, I tell you what, this board takes some time to figure out.
I like the growing pains part of it. Like, how long did that take us?
I'm
30 minutes?
probably closer to 45. I was going to say an hour, but then I looked at the clock. Yeah, about 45 minutes. That was a little ridiculous.
You got a little bit of an echo on my side of things. We'll see if it comes through on the recording. You want to start over?
Yeah, I said something about that to our master radio broadcaster, and he said that he didn't hear nothing. The other
Interesting.
day. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is the Growing Pains podcast, and but no, we're having fun, and this was something that I initially asked you about, and you were like, no.
Yeah.
But you have jumped in head over heels, deep into the pool with me, and we're here, two peer recovery coaches, trying to get to what we can call long-term recovery in our own lives, doing a podcast about it.
Right. It's pretty impressive.
And some people turn their phone volumes down while they do podcasts.
Growing pains. Simply forgot.
Remember that one we recorded the other day, and my phone started going off for like no reason?
Yeah.
I still don't know.
Yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it?
And then I went, like, I was here, and it was still making noise and stuff. I had no idea. No idea.
That's crazy.
But I think to introduce people, we should tell them a little bit about ourselves. Obviously, introductions. I'm Mitchell O'Brien. I've been in recovery. It'll be 3.5 years in the beginning of July. For those listening in the future, it's the middle of June where we live right now. And Justin, you're more like 4.5 years, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing, something that I really thought was cool about us doing this together was I'm 3.5 years sober. You're 4.5 years clean. I'm coming from the alcoholism side of things.
Right. I'm coming from the more drug aspect.
Yeah. Like, if I assume correctly, your biggest one was
Stimulants.
stimulants.
Yep.
So, is it insensitive for me to say yours was meth? Because
No.
you say stimulants a lot.
Well, I do because, see, my addiction started off with cocaine.
Oh.
Then turned to crack cocaine. Then I went to pill stimulants like the pharmaceuticals. And then I went back to crack. And then I just kind of explored all options. And then the last little bit of my stint of active use was methamphetamine.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I just say stimulants.
It's like I went from beer to schnapps to it's all alcohol for me.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway. So, last time, because we did a pilot episode that we had to scrap because we were unprepared in many different ways.
Well, it wasn't so much that we were unprepared as we rebranded ourselves in that short little bit of time that we started it to now.
Why did we rebrand ourselves, Justin?
Our censorship told us that we sounded racist because White Knucks apparently sounds a little racist. I didn't think so, coming from a recovery background.
Yeah.
But someone from the outside looking in, I could see where they would say it sounds racist.
And I would say that on both of our parts, poor research into looking into what we should name our podcast, because we wanted our podcast to be the same as the website.
Right.
And so we're like, white knuckling is the concept of just trying to hold on to your sobriety by just removing the substance that you're addicted to. You're not doing anything that any of the mental health work, any of the shadow work involved of fixing the actual issues or trauma or whatever is causing you to reach out for a substance and self-medicate. So you're just trying to hold on as tight as you can to the point your knuckles are turning white. And that doesn't work.
Not at all.
No. I've never heard of anybody being able to just stop the substance and be fine. You really have to dig into it deeper, and that's both of ours personal experience. We both tried to white knuckle our sobriety
For years. Like, I didn't know what rehab or what it's actually called is residential treatment at all.
Yeah, and I was in kind of the same boat. I just knew that I had to get sober.
Right.
I had never really heard the term recovery in any aspect other than maybe physical recovery before that. And then it wasn't until I got into the outpatient treatment program that I used to actually get sober 3.5 years ago that the term recovery and what it really means and this kind of doorway to the recovery community where we live started to open. And I'll say I didn't even step into the recovery community until close to 2 years sober, just because of circumstances. And you could even say that for a lot of that time, I was really working on my mental health with my therapist, and that was working really good. But I didn't have a connection to the recovery community or that extra bit of support that part offers until, about 2 years in, where I jumped into it more, really learned what the recovery lifestyle was all about. It's almost like I was holding on to that. I just need to get sober and that'll fix my life.
Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. That's actually pretty common in a lot of people. Like, for my daily job, like, that's what I do. I pick people up and take them to treatment, whether if it's residential treatment, detox, sober living, whatever step or phase they're in, and I try to tell them about my past experiences a little bit so that way they feel comfortable opening up and really talking. Because, like, you've done a couple rides. Some people get in and they think that you're just a normal human being. They don't realize that you struggle with the same thing.
They don't realize that I'm some weirdo driving them around.
But, I mean, but that happens. And that's why we only bring in people that are in recovery and are certified as a peer recovery coach to give rides.
That's the cool thing about what we do, is that we're not just getting people safe rides to and from treatment and recovery services, but we've been there. And I've kind of seen the realization and the comfort that it brings people when they realize that the person they're talking to, the person that's driving them to or from, has walked that path a little bit. And it's kind of neat because they're like, oh, you've lived this, you've been there. And it's good because a lot of people, I know I felt this way. Our boss feels the same way. A lot of people do, where they'll get a therapist or a coach or something like that. And you then ask them, oh, well, are you in recovery? And it's like, well, no, but I took the training. I took a class. I read the book. And it's like, dude, you don't know.
Yeah, there's no lived experience behind those people at all.
And it's cool to see how, like, at the state level and the professional levels, that lived experience is starting to gain value.
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
Like, when I took my second job in recovery, when I took that job, it was mainly, what lived experiences do I have? Am I suitable for this job with my lived experiences?
And I would say very much so. because you're on this trajectory up and out and healing. You're kind of like me, like we got out of our recovery programs and we got therapists in what people would call the real world. You know, we weren't forced to have a therapist because of a recovery program. We did that on purpose, kind of.
I was advised I needed one from my therapist while I was in treatment.
Yeah.
He said therapy is really beneficial for someone like you, that you really need it, so that way you can work through these problems that you're going to face through early recovery. And I couldn't believe all the things that I did face in early recovery.
No, that's for real. And, you know, getting out of the program, I only went a short time without a therapist. Finding the one that I did.
That was a pain. I remember we both looked forever.
And you looked longer than I did.
Yeah.
Until I finally found a website, and I can't even remember what it was called, Psychology Daily or something like that, where you can find therapists and counselors in your area, and it tells you what kind of insurances they use, if they're accepting patients or not. And I found out that about half of that information was right. I would call somebody or email somebody, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, we don't take that insurance anymore," or "Oh, well, that's not updated. We're not taking patients." So it took quite a while. Our bosses at the recovery center that we work at highly suggested that we have therapists.
No, it was a requirement because it was free on our insurance, and we had a deadline to be able to get therapists.
Yeah.
Here, because for what we do, there's a lot of other people's trauma will bring up past trauma for ourselves.
Yes.
And if we don't, we'll be doing a ride or something. We're just sitting here at the office, and someone will come in, and they'll be like, "Well, this is what I'm going through, blah 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 blah," and then you'll be like, "Wow, that's crazy," you know, that I feel that, you know, I've been there, I've done that, you know, and to turn around and be like, it triggered us, you know, a little bit mentally. And then for us to deal with that, we have to know how to cope with that. And part of coping with things is having a therapist and actually being honest with them, saying, "Hey, this is what happened today." And it brought up some past trauma that I thought I taken care of, but in reality, I did nothing to prepare myself for this.
I would agree with that. And the part where you're talking about other people's trauma affecting us, like there is a large amount of empathy involved, and it can be emotionally draining sometimes. It is worth it, because even if affecting people a little bit at some point, you know, we are effectively saving lives. You know, sometimes we're just a small part in it. Sometimes we're a bigger part in it. Sometimes the people aren't receptive to it, and you know, it's their own life that they're living. Watching you do that was a lot of fun.
I bet. Just grabbing a water from across the room. Like and trying to be all extra quiet.
Mission Impossible style.
Right.
Yeah, like a drip of sweat come down. He caught it, like just like in the movie.
Ninja-like skills, brother.
I had a question for you.
What's that?
What was like the moment, maybe not the moment that you realized you wanted to go to treatment, but what was something that happened to you that made you want a life in recovery? Like you wanted to base your life on being sober.
A long jail stay.
Nice.
And that's what did it for me.
Something called a county year?
Yeah, it was real close. I did 9 months.
Yeah.
Right around 9 months. And it was really devastating to me. I got arrested. I sat some time, got bonded out. But even before that, like, I wanted to quit using, but I didn't know how. I didn't know the right steps to take. I had asked somebody for help. They really didn't help. And then it turned into a bigger bender and longer use than what was intended for. And it came down to me not really being honest with anybody. Like, I was set up through a place in my hometown to get therapy and whatnot. And I quit going because I was using and I wasn't being honest with them because I didn't want to feel the shame and guilt that came with it, you know. And I had kids at home. I didn't want them taken away. And so there was multiple factors in that, you know. When you start opening up and being honest with someone about something like that, and you know this, you got a kid. Mm-hmm. And so when you're actually open and honest with someone like that, and you're the only one living in the home, maybe with someone else, and let's say maybe that other person is using too, and you really open up, guess who's going to be knocking at your door next? CPS. Mm-hmm. Because it's mandated reporters.
Yeah.
And so there becomes this like guilt factor. Oh, well, yeah, I do need the help, but at the same time, I don't want my kids to suffer. I don't want them to be removed from the house, blah, 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 blah. You know, it starts peeling back that onion of everything, you know. We start at the source, but once you start peeling it open, all these different layers pop open, you know. And
they're all attached.
Yeah, it becomes very painful. But I was arrested for possession of methamphetamine. I was also arrested for a B&E with intent on my girlfriend's neighbor's house. My car was parked in the driveway. I don't really remember doing it, but I admitted to doing it. The cop goes, well, you know, if you just be honest with me and explain the situation. And at that time, you know, it was state cop, wasn't just a county cop. Mm-hmm. So I was open and honest with him. I was like, apparently I did it. I don't remember. I was in a psychosis, blackout moment because I've been up for several days. I'm methamphetamines. I had a bunch of dirty paraphernalia in my car, we'll say. Mm-hmm. And it just bloomed from there, you know. He arrested me on all misdemeanor charges. I ended up getting out of jail like 3 or 4 days later. And then when I was out for maybe a day or two, and I called up the cop because I wanted to get my car out of impound. The quicker you get it out of impound, the cheaper it is.
Yeah.
And when you only pay like a couple $100 for a car, is it really worth getting it out after months of being an impound? It's really not. You know, you could go buy another car at that rate for what it's going to cost you. I liked my car, but at the same time, it needed some work.
Well, I can imagine. In my life in active use, I never had a reliable vehicle. It got me to point A or point B. It got me to get my fix.
Right. You know, so at that same time, I called the state cop, tried to get it out. He said, okay, well, meet me down the road from your house, and we'll go up there together. And being naive to how they play the game, let's say it.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I'll meet you down the road. I started walking down the road, and I thought it was kind of fishy because I could see a county cop on the other side of the main road. And I'm like, man, this feels like a setup, man. I should just turn around and start walking back down the road. But they rearrested me on felony charges because I wouldn't work with the cops. So because I wouldn't work with the cops, they turned my misdemeanor charges into felony charges, apparently. And I ain't no snitch by any means. So it's just not in me, you know. I did a crime. I'm going to go do my time, you know. Why do I care what you're doing in your personal life, you know? That's your personal life. I shouldn't jeopardize your personal life and bring you into because I got in trouble.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, you know.
Well, you can kind of translate that into what we do today. Is you can't take what is going on, or I've heard it said a couple different ways. Somebody else's emergency doesn't have to be your emergency.
Right.
And then you can't, it's almost the concept of don't take your work home with you. Like, there's a lot of difficult things in a lot of people's lives that we get involved in. It's the nature of what we do. And if you take all of that and internalize it, personalize it, it's going to tear you up.
Right.
You know? So, you know, that background kind of helps that a little bit.
So then I went back to jail on felony charges. And then I got I went and seen the magistrate like the next day or 2 days after that. And he was like, why you back in jail? Like, I don't get it. Like, we just arraigned you on all these charges. I'm like, I don't get it neither. I go, apparently they're now felony charges. I'm just as confused as you are, you know? And he goes, oh, well, I don't see a flight risk problem here. You're free to go.
Huh.
Like, you went back to a cop to try to get your car out of impound,
Yeah.
and he rearrested you. Like, no one does that.
Yeah.
They're like, you know,
Especially somebody who has something to hide.
right,
Yeah.
you know. And so he's like, I don't see you as flight risk. And then I started going to my court dates, right? And right before sentencing, my sentencing date, like I didn't get my PSI packet. For those who don't know, it's called a pre-sentencing investigation packet. They go over your whole life, like who all your ex-wives, everything. It's ridiculous the amount of stuff they dig up in your past to judge your guidelines. And like I didn't get that. I asked my lawyer because someone had told me, well, maybe you should just go to rehab, you know, and actually quit using and try to better your life. You're better than this. You're smarter than this. You know, you have so much more potential in life. And so I asked my lawyer, and my lawyer's like, yeah, that's for you to figure out. I'm not doing none of that.
Right.
Which,
Not my problem, basically.
yeah, he pretty much told me it's not my problem. I got you a good plea. That's all I'm here for.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I walked out of the courtroom, never went back to court. Missed my next court date and everything else, you know, just really just didn't care. Went right back to using hardcore. I was going to flee the state because of my drug use. You know, I was willing to give up everything in my life again, you know. 10 years prior, about 10 years prior, I already signed off my first kid due to my addiction, and his mom got married and wanted to have a family. So I signed off rights. So I didn't have to pay child support. Mm-hmm. It's one of my least favorite moments of life. I still have a lot of
Regret?
a lot of regret. I wouldn't really use the word resentments at all, but a lot of regret.
I feel like regret is resenting yourself.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's close.
But anyways, you know, I was ready to do that all over again, you know.
Well, you got to remember, too, and I don't mean to cut you off, but at that point in your life, that meant no child support. That meant more money for drugs.
Right.
You know, if you had to pay child support, well, that cuts down on that, and then you're going to have to hustle something on the side or something like that. That was a rough time in your life in every direction, you know? So it makes sense. Definitely not something that I would hold you accountable to today, you know, knowing who you are and how you've been clean for 4.5 years. So I could see, I still have a little bit of regret in how things have happened with my son, and we'll get into that a different episode. But so I understand where it's coming from. But I think that, you know, just your trajectory now is a testament to where you've been or where you've come from, how far we're gone, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I was going to leave state. I was all set to go to a state called Tennessee.
That was my next question. And I was going to be like, if you could run from the police, what state would you go to?
I would go to Tennessee.
Not Oregon?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not a big fan of the West Coast. I really like the Smoky Mountains, always have.
Yeah.
It is someplace I do eventually want to live in life, but I don't know when that time's going to be, you know, to be able to go do that.
Would you ever live that not in life?
What do you mean?
He said it's somewhere I want to live in life.
I hope heaven's a lot like the Smoky Mountains, okay? Because it would be really freaking awesome.
That's a different podcast to talk deeper about that. But I mean, you could have meant like when I die, bury me in Tennessee. I think that's a country song.
It might be. But anyways, you know, and the day I was going to leave to go to Tennessee, I was actually at Walmart in Kent County shoplifting a pair of jeans that I had no business needing. I already had like 10 brand new pairs of jeans at home.
That you stole.
We're not going there.
This is a different life, man. It's okay. You can admit it
But
now.
anyways,
Statute of limitations, isn't it?
7 years.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
But anyways, you know, I already had a bunch of new clothes at home. I didn't need any more new clothes. If I wasn't high, I wouldn't have probably been taking them.
Yeah.
We do dumb shit when we're high.
Oh, yeah.
We're intoxicated. We'll just do the dumbest shit and absolutely have no explanation why we're doing it. It'll be out of our character and everything else. And I got arrested in Kent County. I was high. It was January 8th of 2020. I went to Kent County Jail, spent 4 or 5 days there. I was like, man, if I get out of here, how the hell am I going to get back up north?
Yeah.
To Baldwin, which is about an hour and a half drive. And I went through magistrate and all that. They're like, oh, well, we're just going to give you some probation, some fines to pay. I'm like, sweet. She's like, you're free to go. And they did all that. And then the CO comes up to me, corrections officer, we call them COs.
Yeah.
And he comes up to me and is like, you're not going anywhere. Lake County's got a child support hold on you.
Oh.
I was like, nice. At least I get a free ride home. It's only child support. I ain't worried about child support. He typically go in, you talk to magistrate. Yeah. It's a breeze, right? So I get transferred back up to Lake County where I'm from. And I sit there for like a day, for that night, go see the magistrate the next day, talk to them, piece of cake, and then I go back to my cell, and he's like, you're free to go. We don't even want you in jail no more. So a couple hours go by, I hit the button. I'm like, man, am I getting released or what? They're like, haha, you're funny, Mr. Burke. Don't you remember those court dates that you had?
Oh.
Like, that warrant was just issued today. Like,
what?
Yeah. So if everything would have been in progress the day ahead of time, I would have probably got back out of jail before that warrant was issued.
Yeah. That's a God thing, dude.
Yeah. So
he's
so
like,
I ended up
got your ass.
Yeah. So I ended up sitting in jail for a little bit longer. I went up in front of the judge. He's like, yeah, you missed the court date. I'm going to remand you to sit in jail, and we'll revene court in 30 days.
Damn.
Because it takes a while to do the pre-sentencing investigation packet. So they hand me a packet in court to fill out in my cell. And I started looking at it and just filling out paperwork. And I'm like, yeah, I don't understand that. I threw it underneath my mat. Because that's where you put all your important paperwork in jail, is underneath your mat.
Yeah.
So I put it underneath my mat. My PO, one of the POs comes up, and he's like, yo, you got that PSI packet? I'm like, yeah, I didn't understand that shit. Is there any way you can help me fill it out? He's like, yeah, you got jokes. And if you don't, he's like, I'm going to give you 24 hours. If you don't have it filled out tomorrow morning, he's like, I will tell the judge that you're being non-compliant and filling it out. And we'll go from there, and you'll probably get charged with contempt of court at this rate.
Oh, damn.
And I was like, whoa. And so I started asking the
Those
guys.
are big words.
Yeah, so I started asking the guys in my cell that day. I'm like, can anyone help me fill this out? Like, I really never been in trouble with felony, nothing. So I didn't even know what to do. And one of the guys was like, yeah, man, I'll help you fill it out. You know, it's not that big of a deal. We sat down. It took like an hour to fill out the packet.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty in depth, like I said before, you know, and we filled it out. I met with my PO the next day. He asked me about my past family, and I was just honest with him, you know, about everything. You know, I was like, my mom does drink occasionally, probably more than occasionally, but not my area or not my business. He's like, well, about your brother? I'm like, same thing, you know, we all use in one form or another.
Yeah.
My mom doesn't have a problem. She can have a few beers one day, go the next day without any beer. You know, she doesn't DT. She doesn't do none of that weird shit like we do, you know?
Yeah.
Which to me is mind blowing because once I start, I can't stop. I want more and more and more and more. I may want to stop, but in reality, I'm going to go get more because I feel like shit.
Somehow I learned through my years, it's not something I do anymore, but somehow I learned that I could, because I would get sober for 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months. This is weird. It was always in like a hit of like 3 months. And then I would convince myself that I could drink responsibly again. And then I would, for at the max, 2 weeks, push 2 weeks a little bit. And then just the smallest inconvenience, the smallest little trip in life's peacefulness would just be, yeah, we're back to 2 fifths of vodka a night. And then the next time it would happen, you know, I'd come out of the bender after way too many months. And then I'd get clean for a little bit. And then I'd try the drinking responsibly thing because I'm like, I can do this. I'm strong enough. Then I would fall, and it'd be like 3 fifths a night. And the process would go. Just kept adding on to another, bottles of liquor.
That's what it does.
Yeah. So I get it. You know, different substances, same principle.
Right. And so I'm in there doing my PSI with him. I'm honest about everything. I go see the judge. He's like, your outdate's August 25th, 2020. I'm like, for real? He's like, yeah. And on my way back down to my cell, I just broke down, man. You know, I never expected anything like that. You know, if I would have probably went to all my court dates, it probably wouldn't have been so bad. Mm-hmm. But at that time, you know, I didn't have people around me to be like, no, Justin, you need to go to your court dates no matter how messed up you are or not, you know, go to your court dates. It's important to go to those court dates. And I just didn't care. So I really brought it on myself, but I really broke down on my way back to my cell. And it just progressed from there. I was like in a mopey stage. I didn't jail well at first. So they put me in a cell by myself. I had a TV, some books. Thanks for dropping your vape.
Sorry.
And, I read a little bit. The first book I read in jail was called, I think, Higher Achiever. And it was about a female that had a substance use disorder. And I was like, man, I really relate with all this, you know. So reading that book when I was first in jail really kind of set the tone for what I kind of wanted to do in life. But I was still unsure. You know, I started seeing the therapist that would come into the jail. And I would talk to her about it, wanting a better life, you know, at first. And then COVID happened.
Ooh.
Shut the jail down, no more therapy, no more church, no nothing. You were locked in your cell, that was it. You couldn't even go up front to go to what they call the library to go get any new books. Yeah. COs would bring you your books. If you could get a good CO to bring you some books.
Right.
So that was a real pain in the butt. They took away our visits. My mom didn't realize I was in jail until about 30 days in. We unfortunately had the same PO. My brother had the same PO. All of us at the same time had the same PO. And he finally told my mom, he's like, you know your oldest is in jail, right?
This is a real upstanding family background I'm pulling together here.
Well, we're not bad people. We just make dumb mistakes. You know, like most of us that use, you know. My mom hadn't been in trouble for like 10 years. She had a beer one night, got caught driving after that one beer, and they took her to jail for an OWI. You know, it's not really my story to tell or anything, but, you know, that's what happened to her, so she got put on probation. My brother had some of his own doing problems and was on probation. And so, and I didn't talk to either one of them in like 2 years. So I didn't know what was going on in their personal life.
Right.
And the first time she come in and see me, she was like, you know, your PO told me you're in jail. She was like, I have the same PO. I'm like, what? That's crazy. You know, it was just like mind blowing, you know. And I haven't seen my mom, like I said, in 2 years, maybe 3 years, you know. And she's like, well, I'm going to give you some money to get some hygiene products. And like, I never expected any of this from her. Because when I was out using, like most of us do, we push everybody away. We'll push them away to the point of trash talking them, just so that way they don't come around. They don't want to deal with us, you know. And I had a lot of resentments, personal resentments, that I blamed everyone else for in my life, but took accountability for my own actions. And so there was that. And when she came to visit me for the first time, like, I just broke down, you know. And she started coming in to see me every weekend, you know, make sure she could come see me, whatever, spend the 20 minutes, talk to me through a sheet of glass, like the little window with the 2 little phones, pick up your phone, you know, and we'd sit there and talk. And I asked her for a couple books. She never got them to me. So being in jail, you're kind of upset about that, you know. Just things that you want, but you got to realize a lot of things in life are out of your control, and you can't be upset about things that are out of your control, because if you are, it's just going to cause more pain and more heartache the longer you become upset about it. And then when they took away our visits from me seeing her all the time, it was like heartbreaking. I actually had a really hard jail stay after that. Like, we weren't even offered a free phone call. No stamps were paper, you know, to write letters for free, you know. So we had if you were in there with no money, you were cut off to the outside world. Like, people just couldn't come see you just because you're in jail. You were really cut off, and it was really messed up, you know. It really fucked me up psychologically that you could just be left in a room like this size, let's say, with nothing, you know, a stainless steel toilet, a TV, and a steel bunk bed with maybe a 2-inch mat if you're lucky. Very uncomfortable.
Hey, I kind of know what it's like. I've done some hard time.
You ain't never done no hard time. The drunk tank ain't even hard time. Don't even get me going on that.
I've been to jail 2 times. Thank you very much.
Did you ever make it back to population? Then you can't count it. If you never made it past the drunk tank, you ain't never done no time.
Shadows of a former life. It doesn't matter. I did time. So it was only 48 hours collectively, but I did time.
Collectively, out of both stays. That's really messed up, Mitchell.
Honestly, it was probably less than that.
Wow. But anyways, you know, it goes back. So I had a really hard time, you know. I asked to talk to the therapist. They're like, yeah, that ain't happening. She's not allowed in the jail. I'm like, well, can I call her? You know, what's her number so that way I could talk to her at least in the cell, you know, over the phone. Yeah, we don't have that set up for a free phone call for you guys at all or nothing. I'm like, well, that's really messed up. And I wrote a grievance about it, wrote several grievances over the next 5 months along with other inmates. And finally, they gave us one free phone call. Well, in that month, in that time frame, I bet you I wrote my mom at least maybe a letter or 2 a month.
Yeah.
And you could really see, from what I remember anyways, you could really see a downward progression in these letters. To the point of me wanting to contemplate to go back out, to go use after being in jail. And there was people coming in to jail that had stuff on them, and I just chose not to partake. And you ask, how do they get it in jail? Well, there's only one place it goes.
You know me so well.
There's only one place it goes to be able to get into the jail. Like, that's it. And if you're really curious, it's in someone's rectum.
Rectum? I barely knew him.
And so...
You need a cheering drop for that one.
So I didn't, like, do anything for that, you know? Like, that wasn't my cup of tea, you know? Like, I'm not going to be in jail where I can't enjoy it. So I didn't partake. And a lot of people would be like, well, you're in there, you want it, why wouldn't you just take it? Well, after you're in there for a while, the COs get to know you. You realize that it's just not the place to get high.
Well, and they're going to notice a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're going to come in, toss the cell and whatever. So I'm not just going to lay in my bed, tweaked out of my mind, and just lay there all night.
Right.
I just wasn't going to do it. So anyways, in these letters, like I wrote my mom, like, I'm going to get out, I'm going to go use. This time I'm going to make sure it's harder and better, something that's actually going to end me, you know? And that was very, now that I look back on it, it's very hurtful that I would say those things, you know, to her. But it was my form of journaling to get things off my chest, out of my mind. And it was hard, you know. And she doesn't hold it against me. She told me a while back, she's like, you know, I still have all your letters from jail. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to read them. She goes, I think you should one day.
That or have like a letter burning like ceremony with yourself.
Yeah, I'm just going to let her hold on to those. And maybe one day in life I'll be ready to tackle that. But today I'm still not ready to deal with that because I know what type of person I am when it really comes down to that. Like, I'll say mean, hurtful things. It's crazy, you know, like, it's just something that I naturally do. And it wasn't until, I'll go into that part later, you know, but anyways, so as I get closer to getting out of jail, my PO comes and sees me, and he's like, yeah, your out date's coming up in like 30 days. Where are you going? And you can't go to your mom's house. You can't go to your brother's house. I'm like, well, I have no place to go. He's like, not my problem. Rot in jail.
Yeah.
And I turned to the CO at this time, and I just broke down again. And it just so happens to be the same CO that took me to my court date, you know? And she's like, when was the last time you were really sober? Like, really sober. I was like, I don't really remember. Like, I started using at a young age. I mean, yeah, I'd have a couple months here or there, but nothing great, you know? So I really don't count it sober because just because I wasn't using my drug of choice doesn't mean I was sober. Like, I would occasionally have a beer here and there, you know? So to me, it wasn't sober, you know? And I'm like, never, you know? I don't remember a time. And she was like, well, why don't you go to treatment, rehab? I'm like, I don't know how. This is why I'm in the predicament that I'm in, because I don't know how. Mm-hmm. And she actually was like, well, let me make a couple phone calls and I'll see what I can't do for you. And a week or two went by. She comes back and she's like, hey, I got someone on the phone for you. You need to come up here and talk to him. I'm like, okay, what about? She was like, I'm trying to get you into treatment. I'm like, sweet. You know, that's awesome. And I go up front and I talk to them, do the little initial intake screening, all that stuff. They ask me what I've used, and I'm just everything under the sun, you know? Well, what was the route you used? Everything but boofing. And if you don't know what boofing is, you can Urban Dictionary it yourself. But anyways.
You and the rectums today, man. You're just like on it.
But anyways, you know, and they're like, okay, well, you meet criteria. We're going to find a treatment center to send you to. And so I wait again for another week, and ATS called me to do a screening. This is pretty much the same screening that I just did the week prior. And for the first time, I actually felt like someone actually heard me.
Yeah.
And he doesn't work there anymore, but he really made me feel unashamed, not guilty for my actions in life. He actually had the same background, being in and out of trouble for whatever drug of choice he had, you know, and I felt a true connection for once. And then I'd go back, I went back to my cell, and I'm like, 2 days go by, and I'm like, I'm going stir crazy because now I know I'm going to treatment. They couldn't get me in until the next day when I got out because I was being released on a Sunday. And then they didn't do intakes on the weekends. So I wasn't able to go when I got out. But in that meantime, like 2 days went by, I asked Steele, I'm like, man, I need to call that dude from ATS and figure out, I got a couple questions on what to bring and what not to bring. Like, we didn't discuss that.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, well, I'll try giving him a call. And when I get him on the phone, I'll come get you. So an hour goes by. He finally comes, gets me. He's like, well, come up front. He's on the phone. So I go talk to him for like 20 minutes, half hour.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, well, I can make a game out of this. You know,
Anything you can do to get out of that cell.
Right. You know, and towards the end, you know, of my stay, everyone knew I was going to treatment. But if it would have been anybody else and you didn't really tell them what you were getting pulled out of the cell for to go up front for half hour, 45 minutes, you'd be labeled as a snitch.
Yeah.
You know, all he's getting out, he's getting off his, oh, yeah, we already know what he's on. and that wasn't the case, you know. And I found out what I could bring and whatnot. And then I did it one other time right before I got out just to have that someone to talk to, you know, because I was really nervous about even going to treatment. Never been to treatment before a day in my life. I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know how to address it. And I was really nervous. And when I got out of jail, my mom goes, you want anything to drink from the store before we go to my house? Because I was able to go to my mom's house for one day.
Yeah.
Before going to treatment. And I was like, sure, a 6-pack sounds really great about right now. She's like, yeah, that ain't happening. I'm like, really? Well, you drink and you're not going to let me get out of jail? She goes, no, nothing to jeopardize what you have going for you.
Right.
And that kind of pissed me off. So I get back to her house.
Hindsight's 2020.
And I started going through my stuff, right? And I'm like out there playing music, doughboy music. It really is what it was, you know. And she's like, you know, is that music really good for you right now? Like, you should be listening to something that's more inspiring. And here you are out here listening to music that entails everything that you just went to jail for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I don't see a problem with it, Mom. And I go back to doing a few things, and then I call up a good friend of mine who I lived with right before going to jail and everything else. You could say we were maybe allegedly partners in some activities. And I call him up. I'm like, hey.
I didn't know you swing that way.
And I was like, hey, you know, how about you come scoop me up and whatever, and so we can hang out, you know, very nonchalantly. And he's like, yeah, I'm not coming to that side of town. You want to hang out? How about you walk to my house? It was his way of telling me no.
Yeah.
I want a better life for you. You really need to go handle your business and be on the right path in life. And so that really pissed me off again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going through my stuff. I get almost all my stuff gone through. Give my mom a few things. Gave my brother a few things because they helped me out while I was in jail that I had. And a friend of mine ended up hitting me up on Facebook because she seen I was on. She was like, oh, you're out of jail? I'm like, yeah. You know, she's like, oh, you want to hang out? You know, I won't use around you or nothing like that. Actually, I won't even use at all. Why don't we just hang out and be cool, you know, and go hang out for a little bit. I'm like, she's like, I'm going to Big Rapids to go pick up a few items, you know, you want to ride with? I'm like, sure. That was the first mistake. When people are actively in use and they say they're not going to use around you, that's a lie.
Yeah, they're going to sneak it somewhere.
Yeah, and we're not down the road 20 minutes, and she pulls out her paraphernalia, starts using it, and I'm just like, floored. I'm like, internally, I'm kind of upset. We go to Big Rapids. We do what we need to do. I get some things I needed for treatment. My mom gave me some money before I went down there. Got a new pair of shoes because all I had was like work boots, steel toe. She's like, they're probably not going to let you have those in treatment.
You didn't have a pair of orange Crocs?
No.
No? Oh.
No. And then, so I pick up a pair of tennis shoes. I get some hygiene stuff. On the way back home, 3-4 hours later, we're finally headed back. And we're headed on the way back, and we swing through Idlewild. And I'm like, hey, why don't you just drop me off at my brother's house? Because I figured she was going to be on some more BS, after everything she already did, using, having dope in the car while I'm out on bond, out of jail. I actually on probation, and she was a felon, and I wasn't even thinking smart,
Because you're not supposed to be with other felons at this point, right?
No, not at all. Felons and felons, when you're on probation, are not supposed to hang out together.
Yeah.
Because apparently you're nothing but trouble.
That's double trouble.
Yeah. And so I'm like, how about you just drop me off at my brother's house? And she drops me off at my brother's house. She's like, well, I'll come back in a little bit and pick you up. I'm like, all right, well, we'll just get a hold of me. I don't have no service on my phone. And so I go to my brother's house. I start talking to him. He's like, man, I just took my night meds. I'm about to crash out. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be at mom's house tonight. I really don't want to be in violation of anything. I really don't want to go back in jail for something stupid. How about you just give me a ride back to mom's real quick? Nah, I'm not going nowhere. I took my night meds. I'm like, so just let me use your vehicle and go back to mom's. When I wake up in the morning, I'll come drop it off and you can run me back. It's no big deal, right? And he was like, yeah, that ain't going to happen either. And so I was like, whatever, dude. I guess I'm going to walk back to mom's house. It's a 5-mile walk. And in this walk, I went from hating the fact that I have to walk back to my mom's house to, by the time I get to my mom's house, I was highly upset with myself that I would even put myself in that predicament of having to walk somewhere when I should have never had to in the first place. And then put myself in that predicament of going back to jail, something would have happened, If we would have got pulled over at all on our way, I would have been back to jail, violation of bond, while I'm out on my whole 24-hour thing before going to treatment. So I go back to my mom's. She left the door unlocked. I went upstairs. I crashed out on her couch. My mom's an early riser, always has been. So when I wake up, she's like, how happy I was to actually see you on my couch.
Yeah.
From where you were at yesterday, wanting to go use, to watching you sleep when I woke up on my couch, knowing that you weren't out messing off. Because if you would have been out messing off, you wouldn't have been sleeping. She was like, I know your patterns. And you would probably still been up. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. But that wasn't the case. And then I went to finish up with getting everything I needed for rehab. I actually only thought I needed like one hoodie, one of everything, because it was the end of August. And I was like, how cold is September going to be? It's northern Michigan. September's still normally really warm. Man, I go to treatment there for a week. That was the worst September I've ever experienced in my life in northern Michigan.
Snowing and shit?
And no, it wasn't snowing. It was just cold, wet, and rainy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to say at least 75% of September that year, 2020. Like, it was just miserable. It was cold, wet, and I had one hoodie and one little thin jacket that I brought to rehab. And I'm like, Mom, will you come drop off some more of my hoodies? Yeah, sure. I'll see what's going on and see what I can do. Nope, nothing. So I called her up. I was like, can you mail me some? Yeah, well, I'll see what I can do. And finally, she's like, yeah, I ain't doing none of that for you. You should have thought about that before you ever went up there, Justin. Like, you're there. How about you just focus on your stay? And I blew up because I was trying to control things I can't control.
Yeah.
And I was really upset. They took away my phone privileges at treatment, whatnot. And it was just a chaotic mess. But in that stay at treatment, while I was there for 6 weeks, I met some really good people. People I still hold close today. One being my boss. I didn't know anything about anything. And I was old enough to know better that this wasn't the life I wanted to live anymore. And he laid stones in front of me, like stepping stones. And I had the choice to either walk these stones or don't walk these stones. And I'm like, well, if someone's going to help guide me, I'm going to take these stones because I don't want to go back down the old road, you know?
Yeah.
It's quick and easy, you know, whatever, but it gets really hard real fast. There's nothing easy about the easy road in life. Never is. And I just did everything, you know. He recommended a sober living house. I wanted to go where all the other guys in the house were going, but I wasn't able to because of my probation.
Right.
And so I just went on from there, and I ended up going up to Boyne City to Nathan's house. Fabulous time there. I was there for about 6 months. I really enjoyed it. This Corey, again, laid out another stepping stone after I was there for a while. He's like, how about you take recovery coach training? You talk to big game, whatever. You know, and he'll do this to anybody that really tries to show or speak that, okay, well, I want to do better and I want to help people, you know. Well, how about you go do this, you know? Now, how many of us actually go and do that? Very few, right? Mm-hmm. You know that just as well as I do.
Yeah.
But I actually did it. I filled out all the paperwork. I took the class. I took more of the classes. I took every class that NEMSAS offered. And then he was like, well, now you don't have to work at the gas station no more that you were working at. Yeah, it was a good job in the meantime, but you can go here to go work. You have your car now. Like, you've been doing the right things. You should really apply here and put your knowledge to a little bit to use. And I went there. I worked there. We left on different terms. Long story short, I ended up asking a buddy of mine who was in a sober living house down here called Project Unity for Life in Traverse City. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, do you guys have any openings? He's like, yeah, fool. He goes, remember I asked you 2 months ago to come move down here? I'm like, yeah, my ducks weren't in the row yet.
Yeah.
So, no, I didn't want to move down here. But my ducks are in a row now. I have a car. I'm mobile. Like, I have a little nest egg of money I've been saving up. Like, I can actually do this. And he's like, okay, well, how about you come down here on this day and we'll have an interview for you? Because that's how they move people into their house. It's an interview style. You know, everyone in the house sits in a room. They ask you questions, blah, 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 blah. Well, in this meantime, I had reached out to ATS because I met all the requirements to work there. I was 6 months out of treatment. I had my year clean because I never used since the day I got locked up to then, you know. And so I had over a year clean, and I went and talked to them earlier that day, and then went and did that. On my way back up to Boyne City, they were like, yeah, man, you're accepted. We want you to move in. You know, we think you're really strong in your recovery. You've been doing the right things, you know. And they're like, you know, we understand that you want to work for ATS, but what if that doesn't pan out? I'm like, man, it's Traverse City. Like, where can I go to go find a job? Mm-hmm. Like, there's a million gas stations here. I didn't want to do restaurant work, but if I had to, I'm not above it, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, there was just a lot of things that I would still go do. But it ended up working out because, like, 2 days later, ATS called me for an interview after I submitted everything. I'm like, sweet. You know, I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm moving down to TC and everything else. They're like, well, I hope you're not moving down here for this job. What happens if you don't get it? I'm like, man, there's a million other places to go to work. Like, I'm really not that worried about it. And, like, everything just so happened to be set for the right reasons, you know. And I think a lot of it was after I went to jail, I started praying a lot. I started reading the good book, the Bible. A lot of people call it jailhouse religion, you know, because when everyone goes to jail, you start doing all this stuff. But I continued doing it even after I got out of jail, you know. I don't do it so much today. I mean, I still pray, but I don't really read any books anymore like that, which I should probably start practicing on, you know. But in the grand scheme of things, my higher power was looking out for me because he allowed me to go to a good treatment center my first time around. You know, I didn't go to a bad one where, you know, the building was falling down. It was dilapidated. You know, there was a million people there. You know, you're just a number. Like, and we know some of those places.
Yeah.
And they're not pleasant. We refer people not to go to there, you know. So I'm very thankful I did go to a place that really did care about their clients and valued them more than just a dollar sign that they were bringing in to their company. And with sober living, you know, I prayed about going to a place that really held a value, and it worked out, you know. And every step I've taken so far, it's because of my higher power has allowed me to do this. And it's not so much of what I wanted, because if I would have got what I wanted, I wouldn't probably be here today.
Yeah.
But it's what I needed. And so when he put something in my path that I need, I took it. You know, I'm not like, no, I don't want that, you know. No, okay, I need that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I took, and that's what I've been doing, you know.
I think there's a song about that. Don't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you get what you need.
Yeah.
That Rolling
I think it's the Rolling Stones. Yeah.
I'm so bad
Mick
at classic
Jagger.
rock.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I just wanted to say is if you ever want to write an autobiography, you can just have somebody transcribe this podcast.
But well, it's me telling me my backstory, and you'll tell yours next time, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why our listeners will be able to know what we're about and where we've come from, you know, and how our recovery journey has progressed.
I got to do that a little bit in the podcast recently that you were a part of, and I had some family members.
Can just plug it. It's called Recovery Dads.
Yeah, well, I figured we would at some point, but I had some family members listen and be like, well, you forgot this part. Well, you forgot that part. You forgot this part. And there's one thing is that Corey has taught us. You know, he's taking some training, and we've even done some messaging training and stuff like that. That you know, there's parts. It doesn't have to be every little detail.
Yeah,
it can just be parts of it, and that's what I told him. And I was like, first off, it's my story from my perspective.
Yeah, it's the part of your story that was pivotal.
Yeah,
just like what I just sat here and explained for 45 minutes. That was the pivotal moment of my life.
I just want to point out that I can't see the counter on that, but I take a lot of shit for my podcast being long.
Well, it's only an hour.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
No, it's only an hour. An hour ago, we started the podcast.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, you know, it's just, that's a little bit about my life. You know, I didn't go into the time from when I was a kid and started to when I got locked up, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time there. Just know I white-knuckled all those years of my sobriety.
Well, and we're going to get into that, too, in what kind of configure more micro stories when we talk about stuff. Because we're going to have guests that we're going to relate to, and we're going to, have topics here and there.
Right.
I'm going to have questions for you, and we're going to pull stuff like that. And we're going to be posting weekly. Once a week?
Yeah, once a week.
New episodes?
Yeah, we record on Wednesday. I'd like to try to post them Friday morning.
Yeah.
So that way it's there for the weekend. So that way you can hear something inspirational before your weekend starts.
There you go.
Hopefully you're at work and, just want something to listen to that's going to inspire you to make the next right choice in your life.
I really wanted to do it.
Because a lot of people, just because we're having a good time, it gives us a reason to have a slip.
Yeah.
It's not so much about, well, what really happened or what sad happened to you. Because 9 times, I'm going to say it's like 50-50, Yeah, there could be a sad moment in your life that caused you to have a slip. But that other 50%, it's, man, I was just doing really good. It was a nice sunny day. I figured I was going to grill some burgers.
Yeah.
I just figured I'd have a beer as I was grilling. Like, I've been doing really good, and that's where it all happened, you know?
That sucks with the society we're in and being, a recovering alcoholic is there was always a reason. I always gave myself a reason, an excuse, an excuse. It was, well, it's Friday night. Well, Saturday afternoon. Well, Sunday morning.
Well, it's raining outside.
Yeah.
Well, it's sunny today.
Well,
Let's enjoy the sun. And
this Monday sucked.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're gonna grill some brats this Wednesday night. Well, you gotta have a beer while you're grilling.
yeah.
It wasn't one. It was never one.
Well, they just don't really sell them in one.
Yeah.
1 12-ouncer, you know. It's either deuce
some
deuce or
40s.
6-pack.
Oh yeah, it sucks.
But it is what it is, you know.
It is. I just think it's really cool that we can take our past experiences and try to throw some tips and tricks to people. One, I hope people realize that they're not alone. People that are in the early stages of either contemplating or maybe they've just gotten sober and they're trying to white knuckle it. I'm just going to tell people that if you're at that stage, it never, ever worked for me until I started to take my mental health seriously. And my spirituality followed right behind it. Yep. And you kind of mentioned that in the story that you said. You talked about getting therapists after being in treatment, and then you talked about your higher power after that step. That's kind of how it worked for me, too. It was like this combination of steps that happened. And I think the 12 steps are set up to get people to do things that way. I wasn't ready when I went through the 12 steps. So I saw it as a program that just didn't work. But then I realized, looking back over the last 3 years, that I basically did the 12 steps. People just said them to me differently. And so that program really does have validity to it. You have to be ready. Nobody's going to do it until they're ready.
Right.
Like, how much are you going to let life kick your ass before you're ready to? I had to almost die. I really did.
It took me being incarcerated.
Yeah. In a really shitty way. Like the way that you described that wasn't fun.
No, it was like if you compared my incarceration and if you talk to people that's been incarcerated before or been to prison, they'll tell you county time's the hardest time ever to do because you're locked in a room. It may be a pod, but still you're confined in one area.
Yeah.
I would say about 85% of jails in Michigan don't allow you to go outside. There is no outside rec area. If you find one that does, it's very few and far between. And I recommend don't go in there to find out.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty lame.
I'm part of a group, a coalition, and you know what I'm talking about here in Traverse City. I don't know what confidentiality is allow me to say. But it's groups of different organizations between homelessness and law enforcement and then the recovery community that get together and try to help people, really. Well, they always meet at the one police station, but one time that their conference room was being used, so we had to meet at the jail. And early in the morning, first thing, people aren't talkative. And the lady who runs it, she's very talkative. And I feel bad for her sometimes. But this time, she was like, have any of y'all been in here? And we're in a conference room in the basement of the jail. The walls look like they're 200 years old, like the ones at the old asylum that have been bricked up. Like there's passageways that have been bricked up under there. It was kind of wild. Moving towards dungeon-esque. And nobody said anything to her. She was like, has anybody ever been down here before? Just crickets. And I was like, I just kind of side-eyed everybody. I was like, well, not in this capacity. Just broke the silence. Everybody died laughing. And it was really funny. It's like kind of like opened up the meeting. But it was true. Like, that was the jail that I went to twice. And yeah, I'll agree. It was a couple little overnights. It wasn't shit. But I'm there now in a completely different capacity in the intention of helping people. Right. And that's something that I've figured out, or how my life has transformed in the last 3 years. I never would have, if you would have told me, not even when right before I got sober or even that time, a year and a half ago, that in a year and a half I would be having meetings with police officers and directors from different recovery organizations or law enforcement and stuff like that. And I was going to be a valued part of that process.
If I remember right, you actually turned down your job when you were offered it.
Yeah. I didn't think, I thought it was so far above me. And this is the messed up part, dude. Ever since I was in early recovery in my program, I was a couple months in, and my nurse there had told me, like, I think if you get some sobriety and get the training needed, you'd be a good peer recovery coach. And so at first it was like this kind of comment that went in one ear and out the other. But I kind of held on to it because I didn't have any purpose in my life. And I was like, somebody saw something in me and said that I might be good at something. So I kind of held on to it. And then it was a long process of trying to white knuckle it, staying sober, getting my mental health. And, I didn't really work much in there. I got a really, really part-time job, and I started door dashing after I could deal a little bit more. But my physical recovery was just as bad as my, emotional. So I moved into it, and then my first full-time job, I was there. And Corey actually came there after we spoke a couple times. And because I had seen him come in, he was a customer, and I was a retail clerk. And every once in a while, he'd have a recovery shirt or a sober shirt or something like that. In the back of my head, it's like I was also being told by multiple people that are close to me not to talk about it because of the stigma.
Yeah.
That was killing me on the inside. So it wasn't until Corey came in one day and he was looking at some stuff, and we were slow. And he was talking about doing videos, and I was like, well, what kind of videos do you do? And he talked about some of the spotlights that he used to do, recovery spotlights.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm in recovery too. And so then we talked, and that kind of broke that conversation open, and we spoke a few times, and he'd come in a couple times, and he did. He offered me a job as a peer recovery coach. And by this point, I had made it a goal to become a peer recovery coach. Peer recovery coaching was a very pivotal part of my recovery process. I even resisted in the beginning. I was like, I don't need that. That's dumb. But no, my peer recovery coach became a very serious and important part of my recovery. And so I got to that point where I want to be a peer recovery coach. And I don't think this is how he said it, but Corey basically said, if you want to be a peer recovery coach, come work for me and I'll help you become that. And it's similar to how you explained it in your story earlier. And I kind of liked it was my first full-time job being in recovery.
Right.
I liked the people that I worked with. My boss was cool.
You could sit on a couch when there was no customers.
Watch TV when there were no customers.
Right. It was a gravy job.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a vape shop.
It was. I wasn't even sure, but it was a gravy job, and it was fun. I liked it, and like I said, my boss was super cool, and I felt kind of bad because then he'd be shorthanded, and it had meant so much to me to get that job in recovery. Like it was a big deal for me.
And the cool thing about the vape shop that you worked at, though, they didn't sell kratom.
No,
they didn't sell THC paraphernalia.
No, they had They had one fillable cartridge, and that was it. Like for the wax stuff or whatever.
Oh, okay.
They had one because we had people asking for it all the time, but they didn't have any of the product.
Right.
They had a couple pens, but that's because the vape pens the way they used to be were that anyway. People are just using them for weed now. So there was a section of like a handful of things that you could smoke cannabis stuff out of,
but not very much.
No, not like the other vape shops in town that are half glass.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
It's beyond ridiculous.
It's the last vape shop that's just a vape shop.
Yeah,
But I remember Corey kind of offering it to me, and I went home that night because I was like, "No, man, like my boss is cool, and I appreciate it. I'll volunteer for you." I offered to volunteer for him instead, and he had taken me to a couple talks that he did, like lead speaks that he was doing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Down at the treatment center, and I really enjoyed it. He never let us talk, but
Right? you had that guy a microphone or a room full of people, and he's talking nonstop for at least an hour.
and then 10 minutes after it's supposed to be done, he's like, "All right, Mitchell, you can talk now." And everybody's pissed and they want to leave, and it's
Right.
not pissed, but it's just being.
Oh
stupid
no!
about it.
Oh no! They are because that group's an hour long, and they want to go smoke their cigarettes and enjoy the rest of their night because that's free time after that meeting.
Now here, listen to this guy who doesn't know how to do any kind of public speaking, and you don't want to listen to it anymore.
Right.
And he'd have everybody laughing and stuff, and now it's like, all right, it's time to be done. Here's this guy. It was great. It was really awesome development in the whole story of things. But I went home and I prayed that night because, like I said, my spirituality was stronger now than it ever had been in my entire life. That was part of my recovery, was connecting with higher power. For me, it's God. And I was praying, and I just got this overwhelming thought. And it was like the visual of somebody grabbing me by the shirt and slapping me in the face. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, you wanted opportunity. You wanted for this. You asked for this. And then I sat it in front of you, and you said no. And in my head, I was like, fuck, you're right. So I messaged him like the next day, Corey. And I was like, hey, man, can I stop by? They were just opening the recovery center.
Yep.
Or you guys were. And I was like, can I come talk to you? And I basically came in and was like, I fucked up. I'd love to work with you. And I'm so happy that he's a forgiving man.
No, he's not.
Well, that's the thing is he was for me in that 24 hours where I was being a jackass. So
Because you've seen it with multiple people that he's offered, and he's like, well, you had your chance and you turned it down.
yeah, and that's why I it's valuable to me. It really
Right.
is because of that. It was not something that was. I was just a jackass. Like that's all it was.
Right.
It literally was something I wanted so much. And I can say that what we do is bigger than just I don't want to say normal peer recovery coach, but your standard peer recovery coach. And peer recovery coach positions are kind of forming right now at different organizations. They're trying to figure out.
Well, it varies due to the organization or agency you work for. Like I worked for one after ATS at Catholic Human Services, and I was a peer recovery coach in the jail setting for Grand Traverse and Antrim County, which means 3 days out of my week, I would go inside jails and talk to inmates. And at first that was very nerve-wracking for me because less than 2 years ago, I was incarcerated.
Yeah.
And I was like, the first time I went into one of the jails and they actually shut the door behind me and it was locked, I'm like, am I really getting out of here? Am I going to be brought up on charges? Like I had a bunch of anxiety with it. And no, I was in there at a totally different capacity. Like they left me in my street clothes. Like I had my shoelaces. It was nice to actually go in there and talk to these people and let them know that, hey, you can make a better life for yourself. It just depends on if you really want to do it. And if you really want to do it, I'll lay stepping stones out to help you. But at the end of the day, you have to choose to walk them.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's on you.
It is kind of wild, and I'm sure, like you just kind of mentioned it, but the first time for work here, I picked somebody up from a jail to take the treatment. So I can say that without breaking any rules. It was the jail that I had went to twice.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there waiting. They let me in.
Yeah.
I ring the buzzer. They let me in.
They're pretty friendly at that one.
Yeah, and not all of them are like that because I've had to do a couple other ones.
At that one, you actually pull into their Sally port.
Yeah.
And they shut the garage doors, and like you can't get out till they let you out. And it's kind of nerve wracking. You're like, I just locked myself in jail.
There's one that's close south from here where they pulled me into the Sally port. They didn't let me inside. I was locked in that garage. But anyway, this one, so I'm in there, and this is the jail that I've been in. I've been booked into this jail twice. And I'm standing in that little lobby area. You have to walk past the drunk tank, walk past the observation stuff to the desk, and I'm talking with the officers and they're getting the person ready. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I have sat on that bench in that hallway for 2 hours before waiting for them to figure out what they're going to do to me. I was cuffed to it one time. I spent almost 48 hours in that room over there, that piss yellow colored room.
Yeah.
You know, that's where they fingerprinted me. You know, it's just like, it was kind of wild. It really was. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I didn't have the anxiety if I was going to get locked up. I knew it wasn't. But it was still surreal.
Yeah.
It really was. And then later on, you know, I got to do that meeting there, and I was loving it then. Getting to go to places in the jail that I don't think inmates normally get to go to.
No.
So, hell yeah. Good stuff.
Yep.
So what do you say?
I think that's a good spot
cast, man.
Yeah, that's a good spot to wrap it up.
So we're going to be seeing people, or, you know, people are going to be listening to us soon, and we'll be doing this weekly. We want people to check us out at whiteknucklinit.com.
Yep. There's a forum page there, and I'm going to set up a couple different spots for, like, topics for the podcast, what people are struggling with. So I think because there's a subscribe page, but it's only to be set up for emailing.
Uh-huh.
But I think you could set up anonymous, so that way you can remain anonymous for who you are. If you're asking a question, so that way you can ask questions, and you don't have to have that shame and guilt of putting your name out there in like a recovery capacity that, because that does bring in a lot of shame. So we got that set up on our page, so that way we can communicate with people to try to help them with what they're going through. And it doesn't matter where you're at in the world, like, we're all human.
Yeah.
And we all struggle with the same thing.
And we're going to have blogs on there.
Yep.
We're going to write a couple blogs here and there. People can check those out. I really think I would really like it for listeners to ask questions. You know, what are you struggling with? What is going, you know, what do you need help with? And then we'll talk about it, because chances are we've dealt with it or know somebody who has.
Exactly.
You know, but we've also got the Facebook page. People can get on there, look at some stuff I post, and they can contact us there too. Yeah. And we have a page on X, formerly known as Twitter. That's I
think
fresh.
It's been long enough. We don't have to say formerly known as Twitter.
Well,
anymore.
somebody that we work very close to just calls it Twitter still, I think. So.
Well, it's because they're uninformed. They're not informed. They're uninformed.
Yeah. But yeah, so we've got all that stuff. So get at us. Let us know what you think, or if you want us to talk about something. And I say, yeah, that's it.
All right. Have a good rest of your day. Later.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the White Knuckling It podcast. For more details on the show and for more episodes, log on to whiteknucklingit.com.